We're going to continue on talking about Kedushas Shevi'is. We're going to talk about 3 dinim about Kedushas Shevi'is today. Not the most famous one of how you treat it, how you actually eat it, but 3 different dinim. Okay, and the first is there's a mitzvah, there's a din that things that have Kedushas Shevi'is cannot be taken out of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, you're allowed to take out small amounts like for a trip, but you're not allowed to take out big amounts. Which means is that us in Chutz La'aretz are not going to see stuff with Kedushas Shevi'is. We shouldn't see stuff with Kedushas Shevi'is because now take it out of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, we'll see. Not now. When we get to the end, we'll see about how they bring out a Esrogim. It's its own shaila how you bring out a Esrogim. And we'll talk about that one day when we get to it. Okay, so we don't see it. What happens if someone did take it out? The ikra din is that if someone takes it out, we pass him that you're allowed to eat it anyhow. But the Rambam says that the din is you're not allowed to take it from place to place in Chutz La'aretz, because moving it to another place is like further taking it out of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, that din, I don't agree that.
What happens if you're going close to Eretz Yisrael?
Let me just say, so that din, I don't see anybody giving a gather to it. What does it mean, take it from place to place? It means is, if you in your house find an apple that's with Kedushas Shevi'is, someone took it out of Eretz Yisrael, so you got to eat it right there. Can I not take it to the table? And I say, well, if I'm going closer, I'll pick up my map and figure out if I'm going closer. So it's not so clear. I don't see a gather as to what you're supposed to be doing. Like, what does this mean? You're not allowed to take it from place to place. I'm not sure exactly what that means. I didn't see anybody giving a clear gather as to how do you do that in practice? So it means if we've had people, we'll talk about it when we get there, when we talk about Eretz Bezdin, we're going to talk about one day, we're going to talk about the Kedusha, the Shemitah wine, okay, that comes here. So if you're sitting at the table, I just heard about it last week, someone had it at their table, the Shemitah wine from last Shemitah, okay, they had the Kedushas Shevi'is wine. If you assume that has Kedushas Shevi'is, so we'll talk about it, so what do? You're not allowed to bring it to the kitchen now? I'm saying you have to just drink the bottle right here? So this whole thing is very not good. This is very fuzzy to me. What does it mean you're not allowed to take it from place to place? Okay. Now, what's the reason why you now take it out of Yisrael? It's not a din d'oraisa, it's a din d'rabbanan. That's an asmachta. I told you last time, a pasuk for it, but it's an asmachta. It's a din d'rabbanan. So what's the reason why you now take the produce out of Eretz Yisrael? So the reason is because in the place that you're going to go to, the produce is not going to have Kedushas Shevi'is. So in that place, let's say you took apples from Eretz Yisrael to Chicago. In Chicago, no one's treating anything to Kedushas Shevi'is, so you're likely or liable to end up treating the Kedushas Shevi'is stuff not with Kedushas Shevi'is, because you're in a place that it's like no one's doing that with any of their produce, so they're eating apples and you'll eat your apples the same way. So Chazal said, don't take stuff to Chutz La'aretz, because if you take the Chutz La'aretz, it's going to go to a place where you're probably not going to treat it the way you're supposed to. Okay, so that's why Chazal said you shouldn't do it. Okay, so therefore, what about if you have a place that's half Eretz Yisrael? Okay, the example in the din is, if you have a place called Surya. Surya is a kibush yachid. It only has the din of Shemittah midrabanan. It has certain kulas to the way we keep Shemittah in Surya, and therefore you're not allowed to take Peirish Shevi'is into Surya because for the same concern. In Surya, they treat Peirish Shevi'is different than they do in Eretz Yisrael. If you take stuff to over there, they have to keep Shemittah. But if you bring your produce from Hebron to Surya, then it could be you're going to treat it not exactly in the right way. You're going to treat it like they treat produce, and therefore you're not allowed to bring it to those places. You're not allowed to bring stuff to Surya. Okay? So, Chaim can ask you a question. He says, okay, you're not allowed to bring to Surya. He says, he brings rayas that you are allowed to bring Peirish Shevi'is from the places that are called the kibush of Oili Bavel to places of kibush Oili B'Tzrayim. If you remember, we talked about that when they came to the second base of Mikdash, to Oili Bavel, they captured only a smaller amount of land than the first kibush. That land is really chayiv in Shevi'is. The land called the Oili Bavel, the broader part of Eretz Yisrael, is only chayiv midrabanan. It's on a lower level. So he brings rayas that you're allowed to bring stuff from the places of Oili Bavel to the places of Oili B'Tzrayim. So he says, what's the difference? Why? What's the difference? There are coolers to those places also. So if you're not allowed to bring to Surya because there are coolers in Oili B'Tzrayim. Since it's only Shechim the coolers and how you keep Shemitah in the places of Oili B'Tzrayim. So if you're not allowed to bring to Surya because those places have coolers, and since they have coolers, you might treat this Paris with those coolers. So why not when you bring it to the Oili B'Tzrayim? What's the difference?
Those rayas have Kuli Alma. Isn't there a shaila in the Gemara about if they had the same Kedusha even when they left Or that's one by the base of the
I don't, yes, there is a Shiloh, but for our purposes, it's true that Oil Mitzrayim has a lower level of Shemitah than all of others. Yes, it does. So, if it has,
all according to that sheet.
yes, if it has coolers and how you treat it, now you might have thought that no, Shemitah. But if you see from Syria that no, if it has coolers to how you treat Shemitah, you're now to bring the produce to that place. So why?
Is the coolers related to eating payos?
I don't remember offhand. Yes, if I remember, I seem to remember.
Who cares?
Yes, I seem to remember that they are. I don't remember. I seem to remember that they are. So he leaves it. If I remember, he leaves it as a question. And I thought the answer might be like this. This is what I thought might be the answer. Maybe the nafkamina has to do with why those places, Syria and Olam Mitzrayim, have Kedushas Shevi'is. And that is like this. What's the reason why what's the reason why the lands of Olam Mitzrayim have Kedushas Shevi'is? The reason is because originally they had the dinner of Eretz Yisrael. When the Yidden came in with Yehoshua, they had the dinner of Eretz Yisrael. The Chum said, keep those dinner of Eretz Yisrael, even though nowadays that Kedusha is really gone. Really nowadays it doesn't have the Kedusha, hold on to it anyhow. Okay, it once had Kedusha, so hold on to it anyhow. Now, if the Chacham are going to tell you that you're not allowed to bring Paris from Eretz Yisrael into that place, if that's what they're going to tell you, don't bring it into that place, everyone's going to say, yeah, of course, so obviously it doesn't have real Kedusha. It undermines the whole Din D'Rabbanan to keep the Kedusha in that spot is undermined by someone saying, don't bring Paris Shevi'is into there. You say, really, why not? Oh, because this is not really Eretz Yisrael. It undermines the whole Kedusha. So the idea that you should keep Kedusha, that you should not be allowed to bring stuff, if the Chum would say, don't bring Paris into the lands that have a lesser Kedusha, that it's like being mezalzel in that Kedusha, and obviously people are not going to treat it seriously.
Yeah, because they're giving certain other coolers.
They're giving coolers, but for this cool today, now to bring Paris here, it's going to undermine, so they decide this cool not to give. However, Syria is totally not that. What's the reason why Syria has Kedusha? You have to keep Shemitah in Syria is not because it ever had real Kedusha. It's because they were afraid that if Syria would be a place that you don't have to keep Shemitah, everybody would run away from Eretz Yisrael. Everybody's going to run to Syria because it's just they can't survive. They can't manage. They have no way to earn a living. They're all going to run to Syria. So there wasn't a need to have Kedusha in Syria. It's just a way to keep people in Eretz Yisrael. They don't want people to run away to leave Eretz Yisrael. So for that, Zion gets a little undermined. It's not so important. There's nothing inherent to Syria that says this place needs to have Kedushas Shevi'is, and if we say this, then we're going to undermine it. So there, the other thing is more important, which is, well, now I'll take Paris out because they might not be treated properly. Okay, so in a place where there's more like I can't say the word inherent, but sort of inherent, built in that the place of Eretz Yisrael needs to have Kedushas Shevi'is, we want to support that. The place for Syria, it's not so important. It's just a keep people from running away thing. That's not a... Excuse me? No, because in Syria, it's close by.
So that's right.
So is the Olam Mitzrayim.
No, the land of Egypt, right?
Mitzrayim itself. Yeah, so some of the places nearby had the same din. Oh, it's not only so. Yeah, some of the places nearby that they were concerned people would go to, they had that same din. Okay, fine.
Your answer then.
I didn't ask it.
You did? I wouldn't mail it them.
I'm waiting for they send me. They'll have to send me today. Okay. But it leads us to a question that's more. That was just an understanding question. But we have a different question, which is like this. I told you that there's a place called the Northern Arava. Okay, there's a part of the southern part of Eretz Yisrael. There are other places like this, but we'll use that as an example where there's a shiloh whether those places are Eretz Yisrael or they're not Eretz Yisrael. Okay, most indications are that those places are not Eretz Yisrael. They're not in the halachic borders of Eretz Yisrael. They're even in the modern state of Israel, but they're not in the halachic borders. And there are people who are machmir that they treat those places that they are like it. They say, no, we don't know, it's not so clear. And they're machmir all the way down to the 30th line of latitude or longitude, whichever one it is. Okay, the 30th degree latitude. Okay, latitude, whatever one it is. So they're machmir all the way down to there. But every indication is that those places are really not Eretz Yisrael. So the question is, are you allowed to take produce from Eretz Yisrael, from the real part of Eretz Yisrael, into those lands? If I'm a person who's machmir to treat those places like Eretz Yisrael, am I allowed to take stuff into that place, or am I not allowed to take stuff into that place? Well, so at first I said no. Of course I can't take stuff into there, because I'm only being machmir to treat like Eretz Yisrael. Again, every raya that there is, everything that everyone thinks points to those places not being Eretz Yisrael. The only reason to say it is Eretz Yisrael is like, who knows? You have to be careful. We don't really know for sure, and therefore we have to be careful. So, really bad it's not. It's chutz lards. Right? It's like bring stuff to Eilat. It's really chutz lards. So, I just want to be machmir and not do work in those places and stuff like that. But, excuse me, who gives me a right to be makel and say, I'm going to be makel and treat it like it's Eretz Yisrael that I can bring produce to there? Okay, that was my first look at it.
Maybe like
Yeah, I can't use that as a cool. I want to be machmish like Eretz Yisrael. Okay, I'll be machmish. But how can I be make because of that? But then I thought that maybe it depends on how do you see this thing. Let's think like this. If you look at this din subjectively, if you look at the din from my perspective, I'm a person who treats that land like Eretz Yisrael. I treat things that grow in that place like Eretz Yisrael. If I go to one of those cities and I get an apple that grew in that city, I'm going to treat it like with Kedushas Shevi'is. So from my perspective, the fruit in that place also has Kedushas Shevi'is. So what's the problem? If we said, don't bring stuff to Chutzar because you won't treat it with Kedushas Shevi'is. No, I'm going to treat everything there with Kedushas Shevi'is. That's what I'm going to do, because from my perspective, everything that grows in those places has Kedushas Shevi'is to it. If I look from the subjective perspective, if I look from my way of looking at it, from me, apples that I find over there, I'm going to treat with Kedushas Shevi'is, so I can bring things there also, because from I'm going to look at that. But on the other hand, in truth, everybody in the street is not treating with Kedusha. Everybody around is eating apples with no Kedusha, because from their perspective, they say it's not Kedusha. It's not like it's like, one or two guys. It's not like one or two Mishigayim. There's lots of people who don't treat Kedusha Shevi'is. So if I'm coming to a place where Be'etzim, there's like a callousness, people are not being careful about Kedusha Shevi'is, from our perspective. From their perspective, they're doing the din. So maybe if I look at it in a more like objective way like that, then I'm not allowed to bring it, but if I look at it from my perspective, I'm treating that place like Kedusha Shevi'is. What are you worried? I'm going to treat it not with Kedusha? Of course I'm treating it with Kedusha, because I treat everything like that in Kedusha. Okay. Next. Okay, that was our first din. There's going to be three din. Okay, the first din was they're not allowed to bring stuff with Kedusha Shevi'is to Chutzarts. Okay. Second din is, there's an Isser Sechorah. Okay? You're not allowed to do, loosely we'll translate it, business with Perish Shevi'is. That means you can't sell them the way you can't take Perish Shevi'is and sell them in the normal way. You can't sell them in a fruit store. You can't, like in the regular market, you can't sell them. You can't sell them by weight and by number. They can't be like 3 for $1 or $1.59 a pound. You can't do like that. You can't sell them in large amounts either. And a store owner, you can't buy and sell them. Okay, in other words, what does a store owner do? He buys it from the manufacturer and he sells it to people. Okay, that's the way you do business. You're not allowed to do that. Okay, you could do it b'shlichus for somebody. I can ask you to go buy it to me from the grower or from the farm where you found it, but I can't. You can't be buying and selling. I can't say I'm going to buy it wholesale and then sell it retail. Okay? Right. It's all kinds of all these things are assured. Yes, great.
I use my shliach.
Shlichus means is I say to him, I need apples. Could you go pick me up? So here's $1. Pick me up some apples. So that I can do. I can send you to buy apples for me, but I can't. Or I can send you to sell animals to me. So there are certain things you're allowed to sell small amounts. So I have some I want to sell. So I say, Yaki, can you go to these guys and sell it to them? Or could you go there and pick up that I want to do? Okay. If you messed up any of these dinim, if you didn't follow the din of Sechorah, the payers stay mutter anyhow. It's just an issue to do. Okay. Now there's a din within. It's not really part of the din of Sechorah, but we're going to connect it. And that is that when you do a transaction with Perish Shevi'is, the din is that Perish Shevi'is are typhus is dumb of. Perish Shevi'is hold on to Kedusha. The Kedusha transfers to the thing that they got from. Okay, and this is just to keep you waiting. Okay, and that's like this. Okay, so if you, just wait 1 second. If I go and I give someone $1 for his Perish Shevi'is, then the apple and the dollar both have Kedusha Shevi'is in them. Okay, so now what happens?
Kedusha doesn't. It's like Tamura.
Okay, so now what happens if a person? Like this. A person went ahead and he took Perish Shevi'is. And he bought with it, he got money for it, and either he exchanged the money or the payers for a piece of meat. Okay? So what's the din? Now, meat doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is. Inherently, it's not possible. Kedushas Shevi'is only applies things that grow on the ground. So he bought a piece of meat either with the Perish Shevi'is or with the money that had been exchanged for it. So what's the din? He took his Perish Shevi'is, that's the apple, okay, the box around the meat that has Kedushas Shevi'is, okay? And he exchanged it for money, so now the apple and the money both have Kedushas Shevi'is in them. Okay, if he went ahead and he bought a piece of meat with that, then he bought a piece of meat with that. So there's now no more Kedushas Shevi'is on the money. There's Kedushas Shevi'is on the payers. That stays for good. There's always Kedushas Shevi'is on the payers, but now the meat has Kedushas Shevi'is to it also. Not the money. The money's gone and no more Kedushas Shevi'is to it.
Why doesn't the money have any more?
So the din is only the last thing in the chain is the one that has Kedushas Shevi'is. So it transfers. Okay.
Payers never transfer.
Right there. Right. So now there's a chiv. Now the chiv of Biur on the meat is whatever. We'll talk about Biur in a second. But whatever you have to do the mitzvah Biur on the apples, when there's no more apples available, then the meat needs Biur at that time. In the middle of.
That's
What? Yeah, it's a din. First it. Okay, now the guy went ahead and he bought a piece. He traded the meat for a piece of fish. Okay, Kedusha goes off the piece of meat, off the piece of fish. I didn't think this Rambam too. I don't know why he gives so many details. You think you would have gotten an idea after a couple of them. Okay, let the Rambam. Now what happens next? He got rid of the fish and he traded it for oil. Kedusha goes off again. The Kedusha stays on the apple, the original apple, and now it's onto the oil. Last is if he. We're on the other page. If he goes and he buys honey with that oil, then the honey has Kedushas Shevi'is and not the original apple. And like the Rambam finishes off, and the din is that honey has Kedushas Shevi'is. You can't use it in a way that you're not allowed to. That's the Malutman talks about. You're not allowed to waste it. We'll talk about that in a different week. And you have to do beer on it. That honey is chayav in beer when you get the apple. So honey lasts for a very long time. It doesn't make a difference. When time for beer for apples comes, you have to do beer on that honey. Hagam that the honey. It's like. To us, it seems silly. How can there be Kedushas Shevi'is on the honey? It doesn't go in the ground, so it doesn't bend them, but it has Kedusha. Just like money, it transferred all the way over from the apple, transferred a bunch of bumps down, and now.
Did I say why he had to give you so many examples?
I have no idea. I haven't a clue.
Vanessa Kim didn't talk about it?
I have no idea. No, not that I said.
Next week we'll have one.
So that's the show. Not from farmers. So it's like people don't want to do any business with them or take any money from them.
Wait. So this is just a bit. Now, there's two. Unexpected nafkaminas. One of them is like this. There are those who say, I think this is what you meant. There are those who say that it's like this. If you go to, this was probably X's example last week. You go to a fruit store in a city where they're not keeping Shemittah. So if in that fruit store, the cash register is full of money that has Kedushas Shevi'is to it. Because somebody came in yesterday and bought oranges and gave the guy 10 shekel and he took some oranges. So the cash register is full of money that has Kedushas Shevi'is to it. So he says if you walk into the store and say, can I have change? I need change of a 50, and he gives you a bunch of 10 shekel pieces, and you give him a 50 shekel piece. You just walked out the door with money that's Kedushas Shevi'is, and his example was, you can't take it on the bus. Okay, you can't use Kedushas Shevi'is money to buy a bus ride. Right. You can use it for certain other things, but you can't do that. He says, so you got to be careful when you walk into the store. That you walk into a store that doesn't keep Shemitah, that you're not ending up with Shemitah money in your pocket.
What about it? They don't sell anything else. It says like.
So the Achronim talk about it. It's really a Shaila Achronim. And the Minchas Yitzchak and Minchas Shalom talk about it. It's a big Shaila Achronim. First of all, there are Shailas about the din of it, or what happened to Bitul B'Roiv, what happened to Bitulim and things like that. And there's questions about that. It might be Davar material. It might be Davar Choshev. Because you can use it to heter. No, you could just use it to buy apples. Right. You could take all the money and use it in the Kashrus. It might be double chashuv, but it depends what kind of store it is. If it's a store that chances are there's very little chance that the money there has Kashrus, then it's probably okay. And Rosh Zalman says in Eitzah, he says you don't have to be so foolish. If you really need to change, what you should do is when you walk in, you should have in mind that I'm transferring the kedusha from his money onto my money. In other words, you're saying is the coin that he gave me is Kedushas Shevi'is. Well, just like if you switch meat for fish, the Kedusha goes from the meat onto the fish, so I can switch the Kedusha from his money onto my money. I can say what?
Well, you just walk in, you're like, can you read?
No. When I give him the...
You change, make it change. Why doesn't that happen in Mela? Why doesn't that happen?
So it doesn't happen in Mela. It doesn't happen in Mela.
Let's explain.
How do you do it? What do you do?
It does not happen in Mela.
If you go to a store that has Kedusha and he gives you 10 for a dime, doesn't the money...
No, it does not. It doesn't work with pidyon. Okay, it doesn't work with the dinners. It doesn't work with pidyon. You have to do it as an exchange. Now, if I take fish and I say I want fish instead of meat, it's an exchange. The kedusha switches over. If I do a pidyon, you can't do a pidyon on Kedushas Shevi'is money. So sometimes you have to have in mind I'm doing this as an exchange for the money rather than as a pidyon, and then it could work if I got it correctly. Okay, if I have a piece of fish. And I say, I want your fish, and you take my meat. I give you the meat with Kedushas Shevi'is. You give me the fish back, the Kedusha transfers. Right. So the same thing if I give you a 10 shekel coin, and you give me 2 5s back, so then the Kedusha, if I have in mind, I'm doing this change. Right, so then now, the owner of the fruit store, he used to have 2 5 shekel pieces with Kedushas Shevi'is, and now he has a 10 shekel piece with Kedushas Shevi'is, and my money is off the hook.
How do you go onto your bill? Where was there a change? I don't get it.
Okay. You have 2 5s, and I have a 10. You're the store owner.
Okay.
So I come to you with my 10. I say, here, can you give me 2 5s? Right. So now the Kedusha that's on those 2 5s switches on to 10. So now you have the 10, and I have the 2 5s of that Kedushas Shevi'is.
How does your Das help that? It's his coins.
Das Sechorah is Makna.
How does that help with the fish and the meat? How does it work with the fish and the meat?
Why isn't that lifting?
It's not lifting either. He had money with Kedushas Shevi'is before. He has it again.
My meat was
He had it until now. He had 2 5.
You have fish Kedushas Shevi'is.
Not the same thing.
Let's say you have fish Kedushas Shevi'is, and I give you a piece of meat. Right? So your fish comes to me now, chulin, and you the meat comes to
mine. It
the
was my Shevi'is, and now I'm going to end up with
Same thing with the store owner. The store owner has 2 5. That doesn't depend on him. Okay, no, it doesn't depend on him. Okay, that's one thing. So you should
Also,
also...
don't have that anyway to begin with.
Some are clear about this thing, where some says you just have to have it in mind. Do it right. That's what he says. Okay. Now, the other thing is, which we talked about once, which is, you're not allowed to buy things with Kedushas Shevi'is from someone. You're not allowed to buy something with Kedushas Shevi'is from someone who's not careful about Dinei Shemittah. And that's because when I'm exchanging money for money, it's equal things. But what happens if I buy, in the case of the Gemara's case, I buy an esrog from someone with Kedushas Shevi'is? So what I'm doing is the Gemara's words, I'm being Moshe to me, Shevi'is Nam Eretz, because the esrog he was going to treat with Kedushas Shevi'is. Likely, because usually you eat things. You use them the way they're supposed to be. If I give him $1, the $1, he's not going to use it in the way that you use Kedushas Shevi'is. But he's going to buy shoes with it. He can do 100 things with it. He may use it in the way that he's supposed to. He may not. He's surely not going to do Biur on the money when esrogim are not anymore on trees. So you're not allowed to be Moshe Dmeim or Dmei Shevi'is Nam Eretz. So because the din that the money gets Kedushas Shevi'is on it, so when I give him $1 and he gives me the esrog in the Gemara's case, I'm not allowed to do that because I'm giving him money that's Kedushas Shevi'is. I'm being machshel by giving him this money that's Kedushas Shevi'is.
Notify him and tell him to realize
He's a person who doesn't care, Yanni. He doesn't care. Yeah, he doesn't care. You know he doesn't care. So therefore, that's an allowed give. It's not Eretz. It's an allowed give. Okay, now, we said there briefly, he said there briefly, we'll repeat it, which is that Isser only applies, that's what the Gemara says, you're not allowed to do it. But that Isser only applies if you actually get Kedushas Shevi'is onto the money. But there are 2 ways that you could buy the esrog or buy the fruit without getting Kedushas Shevi'is onto it. Okay. One is the one that the Gemara mentions, and that is it's B'havla. The Gemara says over there, if he's going to sell you a lulav with no Kedushas Shevi'is and an esrog that has Kedushas Shevi'is, then you're okay, because the money is not just for the esrog, the money is for the lulav and the esrog, and therefore it's B'havla and it's okay. Okay, you're being covered because you're not giving the money just for the esrog, so both, there's no Kedushas Shevi'is on the money. So the Gemara says that gets you out to, that's B'havla. Okay, so that means that if you go to the supermarket, you could buy B'havla.
Right.
Okay, but the other way is, the more modern way, is to do it B'hakafa, which means it's on credit, which is to say is, if I say to the guy, here's $1 for your esrog, then I just switch the $1 for an esrog, Kedusha goes on to it. What happens if I say to him, no, not $1 for an esrog, I say, could you give me the esrog, I'll pay you tomorrow $1. So then, in the exchange, he gave me the esrog for nothing. For theoretical, for a loan, like just something in the ear, just a loan. So I...
Very good. Mishnah.
Not that I'm aware. Okay, so the guy said, so I do is, I say to him, I give it to you for credit, so it's just for something floating in the air. It's just for nothing. And then tomorrow, for the milva can't have Kedushas on the milva, there's nothing. Tomorrow, I give him $1 to pay up his loan, and the Chazal said, you can pay him 5 minutes later. He says it's better to wait. But he says, I can pay him immediately also. Okay, so for example, and in the modern version of that is, most people say is, you could use credit cards, or check even. Okay, you can use a check, because when I give him a credit card, I'm not giving him the $1. There's no $1 here changing hand that has Kedushas Shevi'is on it. I'm just swiping my card, and then tomorrow, however he's going to collect the money from me that roundaboutly comes from me, there's no Kedushas Shevi'is on it. Okay, so those are ways. Now, that doesn't avoid the Isser Sechorah. Really what we started talking about was the Isser Sechorah, which is this Isser to do with, because it's not much credit.
The credit card company pays them with their money.
Right, and then they come back to me. Okay, it checks. It is more questionable. You're right. It's more questionable. It's sort of assumed that it's
there's no money. There's no money. It's just numbers. There's electronics. There's no money.
What do you mean?
In
the check, you mean?
Account number, yeah.
The bank changed numbers, make electronic dots.
Right.
So you have
Yeah, but then I can't pay my bills because of those little numbers. You know what I'm saying? Hey, let's be
Okay.
Where's the Kedusha supposed to go?
Right. So on the check, that's why. I guess that's why I feel big. Okay. So I didn't say that by doing these things you avoid the Isser Sechorah. The Isser Sechorah, there might still be an Isser Sechorah because you're not into business, but the side issue of getting Kedushas Shevi'is on the money, that's this thing. Okay. And one last piece about Sechorah is that part of Isser Sechorah is you're not allowed to process the produce in a way that people do for long-term kind of uses. they say if people usually pickle things, then you're allowed to. If you do that for home use, if that's a home way of using it, but if you're doing it on a grand scale, then you're not allowed to do it. Okay. Now, the last thing we have to do, so you have a little time, which is the mitzvah of things with Kedushas Shevi'is is that there's a mitzvah Biur. Okay, what's the mitzvah Biur? The mitzvah Biur is when there's no more of a certain type of food around, there's no more figs around
or growing.
Out available for the animals, out in the fields for the animals, then you're mechuyev to do Biur. I'll tell you what Biur means in a second. Okay, before we get to what it is, that's what the din is. When there's a certain when there's nothing left out in the fields, then the din is you have to do this thing called Biur. Okay, so Chazal give us the days of Biur for certain foods. I'm going to read you a few. Dates are for Purim. When I say day, I mean in the 8th year. Okay, it means in the 8th year, and olives are for Shavuos, and grapes are Pesach. Okay, now, I have to tell you that this what I just said to you, it's in Mishnah. So, Gemara, I'm sure if it's Mishnah Gemara. So, what bothers me, what I don't understand, maybe that's what's bothering me, David, is that the Mishnayos, this is for sure it's a Mishnah, give a different shear. They say certain foods, the day of Biur comes, Mishatered Revi'ah Shniya. When the second major rain comes, which, just for your curiosity, is usually on Chav Gimel Cheshvan, which is Sunday, 2 days from now. Okay, usually on Chav Gimel Cheshvan is when it comes. So in the 8th year, when the Revi'ah Shniya comes, then there's Biur for certain foods, and there's a logic. There the Yerushalmi explains what the reason for that is, and that's because when it rains a lot, the stuff that's out in the field rots. Well, so by the time the second rain comes, the stuff in the field is rotting, and therefore there's nothing left for animals anymore. So there's a logic to saying that the shear should be Mishatered Revi'ah Shniya. There's a lot of things that the shear is Mishatered Revi'ah Shniya. But I don't really understand, what does that mean there's a shear that grapes are Pesach time? And maybe this year grapes will be Pesach, but how am I supposed, why would Chazal tell us the shear is Pesach? Who knows if it's going to be like that this year? I mean, who knows? It depends on when there's no more grapes around in the fields. So, do all the grapes disappear at the same time? Does it every year happens the same way? I mean, if we farm, do we farm the same way that Chazal farm? Where's it coming from that we should say that the shear is just a certain time? It's a set time from 1,000 years ago. I mean, it's hard to understand that we should follow the thing like that. Rather, we should do which is what goes on in Eretz Yisroel, which is they follow those dates. The dates that Chazal give, they follow. But the ones that Chazal didn't give, like for tomatoes, there's no share for tomatoes, so they figure it out. They have people in agriculture who figure it out. So,
and changes from year to year?
Changes from year to year. Every Shemittah, they make a cheshbon about, I don't know, I'm not sure how they figure it out in advance, but they give it a chart, and the chart says when the time of Biur for each of the
things. On a calendar.
On his calendar. Yes, it's on, what's his name? Ramon's calendar. Yes, Rabbi Ramon has a calendar, and on it there's a picture of a carrot, when there's no more
It doesn't change from year to year.
What?
It doesn't change from year to year.
So, someone said this. It changes so if I would use it from era to era. Nowadays, a farmer will tell you it's going to be, till Rosh Hashanah, it's going to be, this thing is going to be available. But in 20 years from now, would he say the same thing? No, in a year from now, you might have a rough estimate, but to say that the thing is going to be 1,000 years from now, where would that come from? Why would it be? I mean, the din is, now, the good news is, maybe this will help us understand it. The good news is that the Biur is not farm specific. It doesn't depend on if in my farm there are still dates outside. Okay, the Gemara, the Mishnah says, Gimel Aratzis L'Biur, Shalosh Aratzis L'Biur. There are 3 areas, 3 regions in Eretz Yisrael, the Har Shvela and the Chayfayam. There's 3 regions, and each region, so there's a certain side of it which is you're supposed to it goes by what's going on in general. But I still don't really get it. I have to tell you that this question that I'm asking you, Shem Zalman basically asked a question in the tshuva. He asked that he says it's hard to get a handle on why it should be like that. He says that the shear is not exact. You shouldn't take it like Chazal meant to say is that on this. No, that's the day of Biur. The day that they said is the day of Biur, but it's not to say that the day beforehand there were a trillion grapes, and the next day there were 0 grapes. Okay, he says it's a ikar oisa hamin matzui klal basada. That's what it says. Okay, fine. So it's not clear to me at all. But in general, there are certain things that we have an official date for when the Biur is, and for other things, you look on charts, and there are charts they give out at that time of the year. Rabbi Ramon has on his calendar of when each thing has a chiva Biur. Okay, so what does it mean you have to Biur? Okay, there's 3 shittas on what it means to do Biur. Okay, the Ramban says.
Is it Chumash?
Yes, the Ramban says that the mitzvah Biur is you have to say that everything that I have is hefker. I mean that's to say I have in my house 50 apples. Okay, it now came the day of Biur, whatever that day is for apples. It comes the day of Biur. I have to be machmir everything that I have
and take it out of the house.
And yes, correct.
Out of my rishus.
Yes. Okay. Now,
can I then take it back if I want?
Yes. you can take parts back. The Rambam says no. The Rambam says what you have to do is you could take Mosin Shal Gimel Sudas. That means if there's 5 people in your family and everybody eats, I don't know, 1 banana at a meal, so you can take 15 bananas. Okay, I don't know, whatever it is. The Mosin Shal Sudas, you take Mosin Shal Sudas for the people that are in your house. Everything else is usher, destroyed. Everything's got to be destroyed. Everything. So you can keep Mosin Shal Sudas, and you give it to whoever you want to. You give it to find everybody who you want to give it to, but whatever is not given out at that time of Biur to Mosin Shal Sudas per person is usher.
But you can't give it to your friends.
You can give it to your friend before the Biur. Before the Biur, you go around giving to everybody you want to. Mosin Shal Sudas.
The day of Biur comes, I'm allowed to keep for myself. Right. I'm allowed to keep the day of Biur.
Sudas for people in your family.
I'm responsible for, and then the rest I have to burn.
Right, but you obviously you can give it out beforehand because it's silly. It's about
I'm on the day of
okay.
Biur.
And the Ravid says there's 2 kinds of Biur. The earlier one, the Ravid, says that when there's nothing left in the cities, you do like the Ramban, and when there's nothing in the fields, you do like the Rambam. Okay, whatever. So the din is the Ashkenazim follow what the Ramban says. That what we say is you have to be mafker the Paris by the time of Biur or at the time of Biur, and then afterwards they're mutter. Okay, if you didn't do Biur, in a second. But that we like the Svardim do like the Rambam that they take Mosin Shal Sudas and then it's usher afterwards. Okay, so once according to us that we do Biur like the Ramban, once you did
According to Rambam, it's usher no?
I don't remember if it's usher or not. It's usher to eat it. I don't remember if it's usher or not.
You can't give it to the animals.
I don't remember.
That's what I'm saying. Can you give it to the animals to eat?
I don't remember. According to us, according to the Rambam, according to the Ramban, if you did not do Biur, then the parents become usher. Yes. Everyone holds that there's a time when parents become usher having to do with Biur. The Rambam holds that's automatic.
All the fruit stores in Eretz don't keep whatever.
If they didn't do Biur, yes. If they don't hold their Shemittah. Right, yeah, if they're not keeping Shemittah, yes, it's those parents. No, he's in a fruit store that doesn't keep Shemittah at all. They're doing something that we think that they're not keeping Shemittah, so those people, yeah, that stuff, come the day of Biur, that stuff is also correct.
But they still have a chiyuv to do Biur.
Okay, so whether Bezin has, we're going to talk about that. Okay, when we get to Oitze Bezin, correct, when we talk about Oitze Bezin, we're going to talk about that and it has to do with the famous Shemittah wine that comes to us. We'll talk about that then. But if the person did not do Biur, then the parents become usher. There's a machlokes what happens if the person didn't do Biur either by mistake or by einus. Okay, he didn't realize, or there was some kind of an einus and he didn't do Biur. It's a shayla Chazanish is machmer, and some time is makel about that. If a person didn't do Biur,
so what's it called? They could do Biur now.
Do Biur now, and the parents are mutter. If you didn't do Biur, then the parents are usher. So there were sometimes saying it's you could do Biur, you missed it. It's a knas if you maliciously didn't do it. If you by mistake didn't do it, or some kind of then it says mutter.
Is it a din d'oraisa?
It's a din d'oraisa, yeah. I don't remember the story of that. So some Zam said it's a machlokes. Some Zam said that if you didn't do it, then you're okay.